5 to shoot. Crossover. Up, under, and in! Houston and the Cougars with 33 wins and a number 3 seed are coming out of Tulsa, and they are heading to Kansas City in the Sweet 16. It's over. The dream is alive for Houston. For the first time in 37 years, the Cougars are going to the Final Four.
Krisa gets it back. Three-pointer on its way. Air ball. Edwards has the rebound. An Arizona foul, and the Houston Cougars put a smile on the Dream's face.
Welcome to the Scott and Holm Podcast. We are back here tonight with an actual Final Four men's basketball game to preview, a really exciting new U of H head coaching hire that dropped in the past week to talk about spring sports aplenty, including one Cougar program making program history. We've been kind of men's basketball heavy lately, I think for good reason, and tonight's episode still has plenty of that, don't worry. But it was nice in prepping for this show, Bobby, to have kind of a classic Scott and Holm Podcast episode mapped out with lots of notes on lots of different sports. So I'm excited to dispense the preamble, talk some Cougs with you, Bobby. How you doing, amigo?
Buddy, I'm good. Today was actually my day off. I tend to make recording days a little bit easier. It's not like when I go visit stores, they're slammed on Tuesdays or anything like that. So Tuesdays tend to be a little bit work from home, a little bit go visit stores, do that kind of stuff. So today I decided, screw it, I'm just going to take the whole day off. I have some big work stuff tomorrow and Thursday, the days I normally take off. So it was like, well, I got to save a day for Saturday and then I'll just take today off. So I had a good day just out running errands, so feel relaxed, ready to talk some Cougar sports. Let's go, buddy.
Let's do it. Gotta mention some housekeeping here. I've been remiss not mentioning, I think as much recently with everything going on. Please support our friends at the 1012 Network. Bobby and I, just earlier today, in fact, we're on a 1012 overtime episode talking with our good friend Philip over there, talking a lot of Cougar men's basketball. But we also dived into the Matthew Mitchell hire for women's basketball that we're going to talk about here on tonight's episode. Talked about that with him. Really great conversation, really great folks over there on the 1012 podcast and a number of other sister podcasts talking all things Big 12 over there. So please, 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 if you don't do so already, follow them on social media, TEN12 Network, 1012 Network, wherever you do social media. And of course, if you don't do so already, support our show on Patreon, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast. And if you do already, I think I don't do this often enough. Thank you very much. And you're listening to this show, supporting the work that Bobby and I do on a weekly basis. If you don't do so already and like to support an independent weekly show that's been, like I say, always going on for about a decade here, go to patreon.com/SHPodcast, access to premium content. But I think most importantly, just defraying the cost and time that Bobby and I put into doing this here weekly Cougar show. So one more time, patreon.com/SHPodcast. Probably should leave Bobby with the little matter of a men's basketball game that's going to be played in San Antonio on Saturday night at the Alamo Dome. Your Houston Cougars will take on fellow one seed, a little private school in the, I believe, Golden Triangle area of North Carolina, the Duke University Blue Devils. And this is the second season in a row that we are seeing the Blue Devils in the NCAA tournament, but drastically different Duke squad than the one we saw in the Sweet 16 a little over 12 months ago in Dallas. Blue Devils have a truly generational freshman prospect in Cooper Flagg if you've been living under a rock and are unaware of the young man. But I think what's gotten Duke here is the fact that they have an incredible team around Cooper Flagg. If you removed Cooper Flagg from this team, of course that's going to lower their ceiling, but I am not sure if you just replace Flagg with, say, a second or third team all-conference kind of guy, that the Blue Devils wouldn't have still made a deep run this tournament. That's how good the rest of this team is. Bobby, I think I've talked enough. What have you learned about the Duke Blue Devils that you would like to share with us?
Going into the tournament, they were one of two teams that I think everyone was kind of jumping on. I think it was them, and everyone was kind of riding on how hot Florida was. It was Duke and it was Florida. Everyone was talking about Florida. And for good reason. I'm not here to say that Florida's like a bad team or anything like that. I think Florida got hot at the right time. I think they're still hot. But I think everyone, kind of the consensus is that Duke is probably the team to beat in this tournament. Obviously, we at the Scott Holman podcast don't necessarily believe that, right? But I would say that everyone's really jumping on the Duke bandwagon, and for good reason, man. I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh man, this team isn't that good, man. Every advanced metric you look at, if you look at KenPom, this is arguably the best team in the history of KenPom. In terms of their KenPom rating, they're really good at basketball, man. Now, if we're going to talk about certain things in matchups and things like that, I don't know if we want to dive into that, but just kind of high level looking at it, obviously led by number 1 overall pick, Cooper Flagg. He's going to be the consensus number 1 pick, possibly player of the year. Maybe Broom at Auburn is going to beat him for it. But guy's really good at basketball. But the more and more I look at this, man, the more and more I think the Cougars are going to pull this game off. It's definitely a styles make matchups. Isn't that the phrase? Styles make matchups, or styles make fights, I think is what they always talk about in like UFC and combat sports. By the way, it sounds like I watch a lot of UFC with my comparisons. I don't. Like, I'm not huge into combat sports, but like, I've realized that over the last couple of weeks that I'm like definitely talking more and more about combat sports. And like, I watch them sometimes, but anyways, you have the number 1 offense versus the number 1 defense. It's going to be it's going to be fun. And I am, just like I said with Gonzaga, the winner of that game is going to be the team that wins the region and goes to the Final Four. I kind of feel that way about this game. The winner of this game, I feel like, is going to win the national championship. It's not to say that Auburn or Florida couldn't. I just think these are probably the 2 best teams left remaining in the tournament. But yeah, I think if you kind of look at more and more of the matchups, the more and more I get confident about this game, and I probably shouldn't be as confident as I am, but I am. So Sam, kind of what are you seeing, and we can talk a little bit more about the matchup and what we think we're going to see on Saturday.
I mean, there are a lot of guys in this Duke team who really should command respect from any opponent because they've been very good college players and a very good team this year. Believe it or not, the individual on Duke that scares me the most is probably the least polished out of that trio of freshmen they have, of the future, NBA first round pick kind of guys, headlined by Cooper Flagg, who I'm in no way diminishing. And I want to preface this by saying nobody's soul rebels more against the idea of publicly praising the Duke Golden Boy recruit kind of player than yours truly. But we got to say it here. There's not a box that Cooper Flagg doesn't check when you're evaluating a college player. He can score at all 3 levels, can create for his teammates. He leads Duke in assist rate, has the size and the length to get a shot from anywhere. Anyone who's coached him for any extended period of time, prep coaches, U.S. under whatever age, national team coaches, Duke staff rave about his motor and work ethic. And I don't want to spend an excessive amount of time on this pod. Once again, can't say enough. I don't want to spend an excessive amount of time on this pod praising a Duke player of all people, but honest analysis, Cooper Flagg checks every box. Easily the best college basketball pro prospect that we have seen the Houston Cougars go against. And I would say it's him and Derrick Rose for me in terms of pro prospects I've seen Houston Cougar men's basketball go against in my almost 20 years of Cougar fandom. So yeah, no small praise there, but I would still say Kaman Malak is the guy, when I look at this matchup, I am most concerned about. Not saying I don't love what the Cougar big men can do as well, but call it like I see it. Malak's been ruthlessly efficient this year as a scorer. He's not like their go-to guy, but you're going to see him a lot offensively. 7'2" man-child who's already one of the country's best offensive rebounders and shot blockers as an 18-year-old. And the Cougars have played a brutal schedule this year, regular season and postseason, and you've seen a lot of high-level big men in there, but you haven't seen anyone who can do the things that Malak does, because there isn't another player in college basketball who possesses his size and specific skill set. And I mean, more broadly, this Duke team's the tallest in the country, and I think that creates some matchup problems here. Kelvin Sampson's right to harp on the fact that raw height is nowhere near as important as having the right guys, the right mentality, guys willing to defend and get to loose balls as your standard. I mean, you want to talk about where height kind of breaks down as an actual important thing. We've seen Utah the last couple seasons face the Cougars in non-conference and conference play, one of the tallest teams out there, and that not meaning a whole heck of a lot when facing U of H. But Duke's a team that combines the highest end of skilled players while also being a very tall and long team. And I think, I was gonna say that's what scares me the most about this matchup. Cooper Flag, obviously fantastic, but you have a truly unique big man in Malalock going against, I think, a group of big men I really like a lot, but he's going to be a matchup problem for you.
Yeah, I think on one end, I don't disagree with you that he is going to be a matchup problem. But I think I would say on the other, boy, they are like you said, star-studded freshman class. But buddy, I don't know if they've played anyone like our big men. For as much as we can say that there is a matchup problem and some of the things that Malak does is kind of troubling and provides a bad matchup for us. But I don't know if he's going to be able to do what he's done before against a guy like JoJo Tugler. When you kind of look at it, yes, he's got, 5 inches on Tugler? Tugler's 7'6" wingspan, and that's something that, obviously we all know about because it gets talked about every single game. But we're dealing with freshmen here, and yes, these freshmen are really good, and yes, these freshmen are going to be playing NBA basketball next year. But for some reason, I have this confidence that we're going to be able to do something with our very experienced players. I don't think Wani's going to get taken by some of these freshmen. These guys for Duke we haven't seen somebody like a Cooper Flag or anything like that, right? But they've never had to play against a defense like ours. They just haven't. And, I'm going to go on a quick rant about a certain person on CBS Sports named Wally Zerbiak, who I believe hasn't watched a single game of Cougar basketball this year. Just based on his analysis the last 3 days, I don't believe he's watched it. He's like, Duke is going to pick and roll Houston to death. Sam, please.
I hope so. I hope Duke runs a lot of pick and rolls.
I am begging that they run a pick and roll. How do freshmen handle that? That's what, if they're going to run a lot of pick and rolls, this game's going to come down to how do their freshmen handle the monster defense that Houston does? How are they going to handle the double team? You got to think Malak's going to get doubled in the block because we've been doubling everybody in the block all year. Does he have the passing ability to pass out and hit the open man? I don't know if he does, right? That's tough for a freshman. For everything that we've said that, hey, I think this, these freshmen are really good, but I think I equate our defense to playing against the triple option offense. If you don't see it very often, it's hard to replicate in practice. Sure, you can do walkthroughs and you can talk about it, but the way the hands move around, I promise you, Duke has never seen anybody, Cooper Flag has never seen a defense that is going to swarm him like you will see this Cougar defense absolutely swarm him on Saturday. It's just something that they just haven't seen. And for all the credit that we want to give them, don't get me wrong, Cooper Flag, to everything you said, is going to be an amazing pro. Everyone says he's everything. He's never seen something like this defense. And we have to remember, he's 18, 19 years old.
Yeah. I mean, he's not your average 18, 19-year-old, but nope. I don't disagree with anything you said there. I will lightly push. I will say, I don't think Bama's big men are equivalent, but I also think Bama's big men were matchup problem, are the kind that matchup problem inducing in their own way. Even though I think that's more of a guard driven team, and I mean you saw what Duke did to them in the Elite Eight, like just turned him into a fine powder. Don't disagree with any of your larger points, but I just want to say, like, my last point with Duke in terms of like individual guys. One of the really overlooked parts of how they built this team, and I think an overlooked part of them being so unbelievably good, is the work that their head coach John Shire did in the transfer portal last offseason. I think he knew going into this year he was going to have a very young team headlined by guys like Flagg and Malawak, a guy we haven't mentioned by name, but very important. Another freshman swingman who's likely to be a first-round pick here in a couple months, Con Knipple from Indiana. But we've seen in some recent years in college basketball, teams built around uber-talented first-year college guys kind of falter in the tournament. And probably no better example than John Calipari's latter-year Kentucky teams. Good example there of just faltering the postseason against older, less talented teams. Getting Tyrese Proctor back from last year's Duke team was very important to this year's team success, but I think bringing in a couple of veteran transfer role players, Mason Gillis from Purdue, who's come off the bench, and Sion James from Tulane, who's mostly started, were very important to this year's Duke team. And I think probably those two guys, Gillis and James, more important than they'll get credit for because they're both solid scorers, but also won't demand the ball at the expense of guys like the freshman trio and Tyrese Proctor, who you probably want taking more shots, but those guys are good enough scorers to, get theirs when the attention is naturally focused on, 3 to 4 really good guys with that freshman trio on Proctor, and that James and Gillis can contribute positively there. And I think give you the other harder to quantify veteran things as well. So like, much as this team is led by freshmen, this is still a team that has some like veteran roots, some veteran bones, if you will, like in the structure there.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to say that they're all freshmen, but just kind of we were talking about how the defense is going. They've never seen a defense like us. They it's so hard to simulate. The argument for me that I will just kind of pull in from the Elite Eight game, is Zakai Ziegler and Chaz Lanier. Those guys are good shooters. And they were seeing ghost out there. They were hesitating. They were putting up shots and releasing early, knowing that a closeout was coming. What happens to a freshman who starts to do that? It's not that I think that we're going to necessarily get in Cooper Flagg's head, but you can have Cooper Flagg go off and stop everyone else. And I just wonder if the Cougs can have the same kind of defensive performance that they put up against Tennessee. Can they do the same thing where they start to make Duke see ghost? If they start to make Duke see ghosts, Duke's in a lot of trouble, even if it's not Cooper Flagg, the one that we are shutting down.
Just gotta say, Duke's, and this I think dovetails to my next point, just kind of looking at Duke as a team and how they profile statistically, Duke's a bit better of a three-point shooting team than Tennessee.
Yes.
Like Tennessee was a great defensive team and probably a better offensive team they got credit for on the balance of the season, but also Duke ain't Tennessee, man.
No,
that
absolutely not.
We'll say that. But looking how Duke profiles statistically, both offensively and defensively, and I think what I'm most struck by is it's the depth of things that they're good at. How many different areas that by any definition that they're very, very good at. They're top 5 nationally in offensive and defensive efficiency, current number 1 in offensive efficiency. You've probably seen, if you're listening, a few different people say that this is the number 1 offensive or, efficiency versus number 1 defensive efficiency matchup. And both teams, I think, passed the eye test there. Duke's also top 10 in 2-point and 3-point field goal percentage, which it's really jaw-dropping on the 3-point side because they also are one of the highest volume shooting 3-point teams in the country too. Usually see, like, U of H is a great 3-point shooting team, not a massive volume 3-point shooting team.
Right.
Like Duke is an elite efficiency and elite volume. Top 20 in turnover percentage. Very, very good, if not elite, also at offensive rebounding and keeping opponents from grabbing offensive boards. Always a big thing to watch with the Cougs. I mean, I could go on and on about the things Duke's good at because they are good in a lot of different areas, but I'm going to wrap my thoughts on Duke here, Bobby, by talking about some of the things you kind of alluded to earlier, the areas where Duke is human, and I think some quantifiable areas where you could see where U of H might be able to make things happen in this matchup. Because by any metric, the Blue Devils are an elite defensive team, but they're also not a defensive team that creates a lot of chaos, that creates a lot of havoc. They're 178th in opponent turnover percentage, 145th in steal percentage, and 238th nationally in opponent non-steal turnover percentage. If the Cougs are underwater turning the ball over, then I think we could see the Cougs go punch for punch with Duke. And the Blue Devils are also much better defending on the inside, where they are 3rd nationally an opponent 2-point field goal percentage versus the perimeter where, they're very good, but maybe a slightly more human 30th an opponent 3-point field goal percentage. We know the Cougs making 3-pointers is a big, big, big part of like what this team does offensively. And I think it's going to be very, very, very important. I think also, believe it or not, I think it's to the Cougars' advantage that they played the last 2 rounds games in a football stadium. Like you see teams when they go from the first 2 weekends of the tournament to the Final Four, which is now always hosted in some kind of very large football stadium, a level of venue that these guys are normally not used to playing in. I do think the Cougars get a little bit of an advantage of the fact that you played these last 2 games at the Colts Stadium. You're shooting on a different kind of background. You got, I think you probably saw to some extent LJ Cryer's performance these last 2 games pay for it. Like, I think that doesn't hurt either. Like, does it, is the most important thing to talk about at a preview? No, that's why 17, 18 minutes into talking about this game, I'm just finally now bringing it up. But I will also note, one of the nightmare scenario things we talk about this Cougar team, fouls. Opponents who are good at getting the free throw line, opponents who are going to change the game that way, and the Cougars dealing in a hypothetical where multiple key guys are out with foul trouble. And Duke's extremely good when they do get to the line. You talk about the starters, Flagg, Kneppel, and Sion James are all shooting above 80% at the line. But drawing contact and getting free throws hasn't really been a cornerstone of what the Blue Devils do offensively. I mean, again, talk about those nightmare scenarios. Duke, it's not impossible that Duke could do that on Saturday night, but it would go against what they've done for most of the 24-25 season. And my last point is basically the same one that you made at the top. Other than when they faced Auburn at home in early December, Duke has not seen a team this year that gets after your ass defensively the way the Houston Cougars do this season. We've said a lot of positive things about Duke in the season they've had because they've been extraordinarily good. I'm sure in the game prep here, Kelvin Sampson's not telling these guys, like, oh, these guys ain't shit. Like, Kelvin Sampson is making sure these guys know just how good they're going to have to play to win this basketball game. But I would never pick against Kelvin Sampson and this year's team because they absolutely have the goods to beat this Duke team, no matter how much ESPN hype they're getting, no matter how many future NBA lottery picks they have on the roster. And I think I feel pretty good about our chances to be the last team standing if the Cougs can find a way to get out of Saturday night with the win.
Yeah, man, I agree wholeheartedly. I think the winner of this game, like I said earlier, wins the national title. I think these are the 2 best teams in the country. I could throw Auburn with probably a word in there, but they didn't look so hot in March, but they've looked good in the tournament so far. But I think the winner of this wins the national title. My kind of final thoughts is you look at Duke's last loss. I think it was their last loss. Now I'm questioning myself. Their last loss was against Clemson.
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
Which was on the road at Clemson. No doubt about it. Tough. They got that win. But one of the big things that happened was Clemson pressured Duke. Clemson put a lot of pressure on the Duke guys, getting in their face, getting after them. And Clemson doesn't do that as well as U of H does. And Clemson came away with a win in that game. Cooper Flagg tried his damnedest to make sure that didn't happen. And Duke was in it till the end, until Cooper Flagg, I believe that's the game where he slipped and fell on the court.
I think so, yeah.
But that's how they were beaten. You put a lot of pressure in them, you get in their face, and you disrupt their offense that way. And I'm sorry, Clemson doesn't do that as well as U of H does. And so the way to beat them, it seems, is, like I said, get that pressure, and U of H does that well. That's why I have the confidence that I do. Not that Duke's not good, not anything like that. Duke is, there's a reason why they're number 1 in KenPom. They're really good. Another fun little fact, there's another advanced statistic, Torvik. This is a 1 versus 2 Torvik game as well. So these are the 2 best teams. U of H is number 1 in Torvik. He's loved us all year. So I heard somebody say it's the battle of the nerds to see which nerd is right, which kind of made me chuckle. So it's going to be a fun game. You're probably going to want to throw up at the end of it no matter what. I don't really see this being a game where we're going to be bored at halftime. Trust me, there's nothing I would love more than another 19-point lead at the half for your Houston Cougars. But don't expect it to happen. And if it does happen, don't expect it to be a thing where it's like, oh, well, game's over. It's going to be a game where both teams throw haymakers and go on some deep runs. And it's whoever is going to survive or have the slightly better runs that's going to win this game.
Bobby, I have one more thing on the topic of the Final Four in men's basketball tournament, if you will allow me.
Let's go, buddy.
So we kicked this question around near the end of our spot with our 1012 network friend Philip earlier today. I would encourage everyone listening to go seek out, listen to, or watch that if you've not done so already. And I'm curious if in the 8 or 9 hours since we did this spot, if your answers change. But let's say, for this hypothetical, Cougars get past Duke on Saturday night, get to play for the whole enchilada on Monday night. Who would you rather face out of Florida and Auburn, the two opponents on the other side of the bracket, and why?
I think earlier on that pod, I think I said Florida, and I think I'm staying with Florida. I think if you're going to win the national title, to me, look, a lot of people love to say oh, we want to do this, right? And we want to play the best teams and win. This is the best Final Four of all time, arguably. So any team you choose here is probably a bad answer, but simply looking at Florida, if I had to choose an opponent for U of H, I would want the worst defensive team, because Houston will sometimes get cold from the field, and the team that we can make easier baskets on, which I do believe is probably Florida, with their 10th ranked KenPom defense. I just want a team that we can score easier on, because I am of the belief that U of H is going to get stops and that U of H is going to keep opponents from getting to the bucket. So give me the team that has the worst offense or the worst defense, so that we can continue to score and have it easier to score.
I'm going to stick with my pick from earlier too, Florida. And I realize it's hard for a team to beat an opponent twice, which Auburn would have to do if they faced U of H again. But that Auburn team has so many different weapons offensively, not just the veteran guys like Janai Broom, Denver Jones, and Chad Baker-Mazara, but the guy who was the X factor the last time these teams played, Todd Pettiford, their diminutive freshman who can just get so hot from deep and torch the Cougars at the Toyota Center back in November. And it's not to say that Florida doesn't have weapons. They're the number 2 offensive efficiency team in the country, only behind the Duke team that we're facing in the Final Four. And they got veteran go-to guys themselves. Walter Clayton Jr. and Will Richard, I think, present the same challenges a lot of those Auburn go-to scoring guards that I mentioned. Not to mention, they got a couple skilled big men in Thomas Hoff and Ellis Condon. But call this a vibes pick. I'd rather face the team that hasn't seen U of H this season. You talked about it in the matchup with Duke.
Mm-hmm.
You can't simulate what U of H does. If it's your first time seeing the Cougars, it could be a real shock to your system. We saw a Tennessee team that's one of the toughest out there not be able to cope with what the Cougars do. It had never seen anything like that before this season. Auburn has. Call it a vibes pick. I'd rather face Florida and their guys in the spot than Auburn, acknowledging that, of course, either of those teams, any team that's in this Final Four has, by definition, been one of the best 4 in the country this season. I think I'm going to join you and go with Florida as well if we are lucky enough to see the Cougars get to the national title game.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed that we play in a national title game. To be honest, if we're in the Natty, I don't care who we're playing. We're in the Natty.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
Right. I would rather see Florida, but look, I'm not going to be like, oh, man, if it doesn't happen. The fun thing is, we are the last Final Four game. We're the second Final Four game. So, good news. We'll know who we're playing if we win that game without having to watch and cheer for anybody.
Exactly. And I want to say also, I'm very excited for you and co-host Emeritus Dustin getting to be out there in San Antonio.
Yeah. Quickly learned that that my ticket is for, found this out almost right after we were done recording, that it's actually for both semifinal games is my ticket. So that's nice. I don't know. I think I may be participating in more pregame activities for U of H. So I may not make the first game because I may be having fun with friends celebrating an incredible U of H team, but I will definitely be there.
Can't believe you'd rather do that. Can't believe you'd rather do that than see a game that would freely be on television. Any of these things, being social. How dare you? No, I'm like I said, I am so stoked for you guys. I'm I'm not going to be there in person, but I'm going to be, I would say, doing the next coolest thing, which is watching with my father on a pre-planned early April trip to see my folks out in Tejas. So I'm excited about that too, but obviously very excited for you and our erstwhile friend Dustin.
Well, thanks, buddy. I'm excited. You're excited.
So we're sticking with the topic of hoops here. For the first time, it feels like a very, very long time, Bobby. We are coming on here to this show with a very, very exciting story to talk about that involves Cougar women's basketball. But that story today is specifically the hiring of new head coach Matthew Mitchell. Happened in the last week since we recorded. He was officially introduced today, has press conference at the Fertitta Center. If you want some background, Mitchell was previously the head coach of the University of Kentucky's women's basketball program from 2007 through 2020. During his run at UK, Mitchell was three times named the SEC Coach of the Year, made the NCAA tournament 9 times, and would have been a 10th if not for the 2020 tournament getting canceled due to the onset of COVID-19. Mitchell previously served as the head coach at Morehead State. Immediately before taking the head coaching job at UK, was an SEC assistant at Florida and Kentucky. Even served as a grad assistant under Pat Summitt, the legendary Tennessee women's basketball head coach. So you might be wondering to yourself, okay, well, why is Matthew Mitchell, extremely well-credentialed SEC coach, taking a women's basketball job that we have dubbed the 16th best out of 16 in the Big 12 right now? Immediately before the 2020-21 season, Mitchell retired, even though he specifically said since that this wasn't the main reason. Worth noting, big context to that, as he suffered a serious head injury in March of 2020 on a family vacation in Mexico, had to literally have brain surgery because of after effects of that injury. Also, his family was very well off. And I mean, being a D1 head coach is such a life-consuming occupation. You could very much understand why someone would want to have some time to watch their kids grow up, be involved in the team building, coaching performance ways that don't involve 18 to 20 hour work days almost the entire calendar year. And you could also understand the flip side, why someone who is as good at coaching as Mitchell was would be itching to return. Bobby, I think I've bogarted the microphone here long enough without letting you cut in. What do you think of the Matthew Mitchell hire, and bigger picture, what do you think that hire means for Cougar women's basketball and what that program could do in the Big 12?
When Huey decided to leave and was probably told that his contract wasn't being renewed, which shout out Coach Huey, got an assistant job like we thought he might at Virginia. So congrats.
Glad you mentioned. I had that in the notes at the end to mention before, but
just
always give me somebody we're rooting for at the pod.
Yep, absolutely, great guy there. But when we first thought of it, we were kind of just like, all right, who can we kind of get that's kind of cheap, that we haven't shown that we were going to do a lot of exciting. We weren't going to spend a lot of money, and so we were trying to find some people, and we had the UTSA coach on our list, but it was kind of one of those like, she's kind of expensive. I don't know if we're going to be able to get her. And then suddenly the finalist list comes out, and you see Matthew Mitchell and a few others, and you're kind of like, whoa, hold on. Matthew Mitchell, you kind of Google it, because, look, let's be honest, we're not following women's college basketball that close, where I just know a name off the top of my head like that. But then you kind of see it, and you're like, okay, that's not exactly what I was thinking here. And you kind of think to yourself when it first goes down, you're kind of like, well, maybe if we get the Lamar coach, that'll be kind of exciting. And then suddenly you're getting a 3-time SEC coach of the year and somebody who's been to multiple Elite Eight, or I think one Elite Eight.
No, you're right. You're right. The first
multiple, right? Yeah. And so you just kind of get excited by that. And then his presser today, fantastic. Talked about coming to Houston with his parents as a kid in like 1988. He got his first pair of Air Jordans here. And now he's at a Jordan school. So I think the hire's great. He talked about wanting to play an exciting style of basketball. But, every coach says that. The most exciting brand of basketball you can play is one that wins. And I think Coach Mitchell is going to win. I simply think that is what's going to happen. I think I've said this multiple times to you. I said it on another podcast that, like, to be honest, he really feels like an SEC guy, right? He's from Mississippi. He spent 12 years at Kentucky. He was a grad assistant at Tennessee. He feels like an SEC guy. And let me tell you, if he's gone in 3 years to take a SEC coaching job, that probably means he did a pretty good job here. That's not my expectation, but I won't be heartbroken if it happens because it means he's had a lot of success here and he set us up. Would I love for him to be here the next 20 years and be successful and go to multiple tournaments? Absolutely. Have Elite Eight runs. I would prefer that, but I'm also well aware that where we stand in women's basketball hierarchy, and this is a slam dunk hire. This is everything that we could have asked for in a hire for a women's basketball coach.
One of the things beyond his obviously incredible on-court achievements at Kentucky that really stood out to me is how good he was the public-facing stuff. Like, you go look at the social media post announcing Matthew Mitchell is officially the head coach of the University of Houston. It is just flooded with Kentucky fans being like, this guy is a rock star. This guy is one of my favorite all-time Kentucky coaches. Like, he didn't just win at a high level there, but obviously that's the most important thing, the winning the basketball games. But he was so good at the public-facing stuff too. Like, he's at their midnight madness dancing. Like, you talk about like a guy who could win the press conference, a guy who could make a sport that's been an afterthought here really fucking matter to Houston Cougar fans. Like, that's so important. Like,
and he talks about that in his presser.
Yeah, getting the ball, like the ball coaching stuff is important. Like, if that doesn't happen, the winning games doesn't happen, all the other good stuff doesn't happen. But the ability to engage the public at large, insanely important for a program that's just been an afterthought to a large percentage of the Cougar fan base. Like, to be a guy who engages the fan base, and I saw that kind of, you know, a microcosm of that when the hire was announced. Like, people who don't normally pay attention to this program, you know, I mean, big shout out to all, you know, the entities out there who largely act like U of H only fields 2 intercollegiate sports. But I'll stop being petty here at recognizing this hire. You saw that, and like, to capture that, I think is so important. And I think Matthew Mitchell is absolutely capable of doing that. I agree with you. Like, there's a decent chance here in 3 or 4 years that he's no longer the head coach. But if he's not here in 3 or 4 years and he's taking an SEC job, chances are it's a much better job to market, to hire people to, than when Matthew Mitchell got here. Like, that's a win-win scenario. Obviously, the preference would be he sticks around here and becomes, you know, the Kelvin Sampson of women's basketball here at this program. Like, that would be great. Bobby and I would obviously be pinching ourselves if that's the reality here, and that he turns this program into one that like makes us pay attention to the women's selection show after the men's selection show. I think that was the scenario you brought up when we were on with our 10-12 friend Philip earlier today. But just win here. And I think he's a guy capable of doing that. There are risks in this hire, but there would have been risks in any of the hires that you were going to make here. He hasn't coached in this current era with NIL, with the transfer portal being an even bigger part of roster building. But also, he wasn't living in a cave and completely unaware of what was going on in college basketball like these past 4 or 5 years. Like, the guy is still plugged in. And frankly, the fact that he was out of the sport the last 4 or 5 years, it's kind of the reason why a guy with his resume was willing to take this job, a program that has struggled to do anything in the Big 12 since you've made this move. And I've been really impressed with the enthusiasm I've seen from the Cougar fan base, a recognition immediately that, hey, this guy's a really good hire. But for him to succeed, I think that enthusiasm from all of us in this fan base can't just be late March or early April enthusiasm. It needs to translate to a greater percentage of all of us in Cougar fandom getting out to women's basketball at the Fertitta Center more often, a greater percentage of us donating. I mean, just speaking for myself here, I'm going to do like I do with volleyball and get a women's basketball season ticket, even though I live a few states away, because like, I want to make an effort to support this program. I want to make an effort to have some financial stake in this program and do my part to make an effort to get out to Houston on the weekends where I can collectively see both the men's and women's basketball team. All of us, I think it's going to take us doing little things like that. That's going to allow Matthew Mitchell to succeed in this program and make Cougar women's basketball a team I think we could all be proud of.
Yeah, just super excited. Low-key, one of my favorite things to always go to when I was in school was women's basketball games. One of my favorite athletes in the history of Cougardom for me since 2007 is shout out Courtney Taylor. Just Porsche Speed Landry. Just a lot of good memories at women's basketball games. It can be really fun to go to some of those games. So hoping that, I mean, good Lord, I was at the TCU game this year, in TCU at TCU. So, yeah, I really hope that this is the hire that takes us not even just to the next level, but to a level. I think we've talked before that I think this job is clearly a year zero, and it may be a year 00, in terms of what we have now. Year zeros are a lot harder to justify, because of the transfer portal and things like that. But I think it's going to take some time. I don't expect it to be the 3 years where I'm like, oh yeah, 3 years and he's going to go. I would love it if that happened. But Sam, let me ask you this before we move on. What are your expectations for this women's basketball program? What is the goal for Coach Mitchell going forward?
I think my year one general expectation would be not dead last in the Big 12. And we see a style of play. We see a style of play, whether that's, we're going to be a team that grinds it out, low possessions, really, really good defensively, or a team that kind of did what maybe Huey's program at times flashed, but didn't always consistently deliver on, pressing and exciting stuff like that, and occasionally getting an opponent because you're showing a unique frenetic style that they just can't cope with. That's really what I want to see. Like I have very modest expectations. Don't be the worst team in the league, and we start to see flashes of what Matthew Mitchell Houston Cougar basketball wants to look like, while I think still having fair expectations of, hey, this was the 16th out of 16th best programs, and we don't know how much money is going to actually be flowing in, though I have faith that he's the guy that can maximize like what's available to that program out there.
Yeah, and just as like a whole, like going forward, my expectation, not just for year one, but for this program, is we're constantly fighting for the tournament. My expectations aren't always going to be like, oh, it's Final Four or bust, or we got to hit Elite Eights and anything like that. I just want to see this team consistently compete and, definitely be one of those teams that heads to the NIT, and is making a run every so often in the tournament. You go to a Sweet 16 every so often. You're definitely a top half of the Big 12 on the bubble for the tournament every single year.
And you go against Kentucky teams also. Like he wasn't in the Elite Eight his first year. It was a bit like WNIT the first couple seasons, and then by year 3 and 4 they were competing in the tournament.
Yep.
As much as like how you build a program is different now and all that stuff, I think it's going to be a build. I just kind of want to see glimpses of proof of concept in year one. That's my short-term goal, and my long-term goal is like you, just be around the tournament picture. Just be me actually like tune into the women's show with like some belief that U of H might actually get their name called here.
Yeah,
that's the hope.
I agree.
And we're going to shift to Cougar Spring Sports for a team that achieved some history. You're here the hard house beats. You're going to hear the shots because, ladies and gentlemen, we are in Cougar Tennis Corner. And I'll admit I am overdue to bring y'all Cougar Tennis Corner, a first time after a Big 12 conference win, Cougar Tennis Corner, in which the Cougars finally achieved this past weekend via a 4-2 win over the Cincinnati Bearcats at home. And I think what made that specific win even sweeter was you had 2 nights before another extremely frustrating close call against a conference opponent that was one of the ones that you circled to maybe be a good candidate for the victory. That near miss that I'm alluding to was a 4-3 loss on Friday night to West Virginia, played off campus at the Sweetwater Country Club, I believe due to concerns about weather preventing that match from happening in the Cougars' regular outdoor facility. Because of weird court availability stuff at Sweetwater, the match went in the opposite of the usual order for a team college tennis match. You actually had the 6 singles matches happening prior to the 3 doubles matches, usually opposite order. And the
I
Mountaineers
knew
and
I
Cougars,
wasn't crazy. Sorry to interrupt. I knew I wasn't crazy when I was watching. I was like, wait, why did a doubles match not finish? Like, I'm sorry. I was like following the results, and I was like, this is backwards.
Well, I mean,
sorry.
Usually, I was gonna say if one of the teams takes the 2 matches, they'll go and finish. But yeah, like also definitely happening in weird order. Mountaineers and Cougars split the singles matches 3-3 with Santa Strombaja, Valeria Croatina, and Sophie Schouten winning there on their respective courts. But I think given the struggles that you've had this year in doubles play, probably were hoping to just wrap the match up in singles. That was your most clear path to winning the match outright, is getting 4 of the points there. Unfortunately, couldn't do that. Whatever underlying reasons, you've really struggled in Big 12 play. When it comes to doubles, I will give credit to the doubles courts. Croatina and Hedda Newtonen playing for the first time together as a doubles pairing, 1 on court 3, but unfortunately the Cougars were not able to win either of the remaining 2 matches. West Virginia took the match 4-3 that way. I don't know the whole story, but I think there was some bad blood afterwards. West Virginia was also is one of the teams around you in the standings, is probably hungry for a match. So excited for a little spice if or when the Cougars face the Mountaineers in the next Big 12 season. And it's been a season with a lot of frustrating near misses, adversity, like losing Lisa Morisova to a season-ending injury mid-year, not having the healthy 6 players that you need for the minimum for a match in a couple Big 12 bouts this season. This still had to be up there. But Cougars returned to campus on Sunday for their final home regular season match of 2025 on a day where the program's lone senior, Santa Strombaja, was honored. Cougs kept fighting and ultimately made program history against the Cincinnati Bearcats. It wouldn't be a Cougar tennis match this season without some adversity. Unfortunately, not a huge surprise. Kind of like I just got done talking about with the West Virginia match, the doubles portion of this one proved challenging. Since he won on courts 1 and 3 to clinch that team point, and the Cougars were down 5-4, and the only court that went unfinished with Santa Strombaja and Eva Seppa playing there. But Cougars bounced back in a big way on the singles courts. I wanted to specifically highlight your 2 of your performances, Eva Seppa on court 2 and Gabby Cortez on court 6. I think more than any of the 3 sophomores who came over with Strombaja from Grand Canyon, who competed for Kat Adamovich last season there, Eva Seppa was really asked to take on a more challenging role than she had in her previous one college season. If you're playing on court 1 or 2 in college, basically every match you're playing against one of your opponent's top singles players. And that's an entirely new and challenging experience for Seppa. I mean, Strombaja was Grand Canyon's court 2 player last season. So Seppa's had to, take on entirely different challenges. And compounding that, she really has specifically lost an absurd number of tiebreakers this season. If you're wondering what's tiebreaker, quick tennis lesson. A tiebreaker is a first to 7 points minigame that occurs when a set is tied 6-6, which kind of just keeps the set from going on for an absurd amount of time. And true to form, Seppa's first set against Cincy's Rosalia Grushenka went to a tiebreaker that she ultimately lost 7-5, but bounced back in a big way, won the second set 6-4 to save alive, and then forced a third set, which she won by an emphatic 6-2 score. Seppa's deciding set was actually what ultimately decided the match at large. I mean, if you go to the UH Tennis, Twitter or Instagram account, Seppa winning her match point clinched the match, and you see the video of it, and you see all of her teammates mobbing her to celebrate afterwards. Super, super cool moment, because I don't know if any individual player has borne the brunt of how tough Big 12 play has been on this team than Eva Seppa, and she really deserved this moment. And tennis, kind of like golf, would you like to talk about here, Bobby? Tennis can be a really lonely sport when you're not getting results, even when you're playing in a team context like this one. And I really can't imagine how cathartic Sunday was for Eva, who got her long overdue first Big 12 singles win in a really, really big moment for this team. Mentioned it earlier, you also got a really big performance from Gabby Cortez, who for much of this season was the odd player out in the singles courts, but has been a part of your most successful doubles pairing this season, competing with Sophie Schouten there, mostly on court 3, but more on court 1 and 2 lately. Fair to say, Cortez is only competing in singles right now because you only have 6 healthy players able to go out there, and she bounced back from a tough 6-3 loss in her opening set against Isabel Pacheco to take the final two sets, 6-3, 6-3 in both of them, to give U of H a 3-2 lead over Cincy at that point and set up Seppa for her match-winning performance. But I also want to highlight your most consistent performers in Big 12 play, Valeria Krohotina and Sophie Schouten, who on courts 3 and 5 respectively really came through for you on Sunday. That was actually Sunday. Krohotina, her first time playing on court 3 this spring, won her match in straight sets, got the Cougars their first team point, and then Sophie Schouten bounced back from losing her second set to finish off Sakurako Watanabe, who is Cincy's best singles player. She actually came into Sunday with a 9-2 record, and Schouten winning that point allowed you to tie the match at 2-2 and ultimately have Cortez and Seppa in that order finish off the Bearcats and win 4-2. So Cincy was definitely 100% of one of those matches in Big 12 play that you had circled on the schedule as a better chance to get a Big 12 win. But also nothing this season has come easy for you. And when you're dealing with a long conference losing streak like Cougar tennis is, it can start to weigh really heavily on everyone in the program. And I think Coach Cat would be the first to tell you, me, anyone listening that her goals for this Cougar tennis program are bigger than just simply winning one Big 12 match. But also sometimes getting that first win can be incredibly hard. Like constantly hitting a big rock over and over again, trying to break it. And I'm immensely proud of Kat, assistant coach Georgia Pazan, and of course all the young women on the roster that they finally hit the rock until it broke, finally had something to celebrate in conference play on Sunday afternoon, because big things get built with humble first steps sometimes. And you know, on Sunday specifically, when this match happened, all of us were celebrating another Cougar men's basketball Final Four, but worth remembering, Cougar men's basketball didn't get there overnight. I remember Kellen Sampson coming on this podcast and talking about, at the time, during their first season in 2014, 2015, what a big deal it was to them in that program that after starting 1-13 in conference play, they won 3 of their final 4 AAC games. And the younger Sampson even mentioned that that was a big selling point for Rob Gray and his dad, and ultimately closing the deal on a guy who was at the time a really transformational player for that program. So I'll stop bogarting the microphone, Bobby. Not guaranteeing future Final Fours or anything like that for Cougar tennis. Just reiterating that big things can get built with humble first steps. And I believe as wholeheartedly as I did 11-ish months ago when she was hired that Kat Adamovich is going to have big things in this program. And I think this was the first step there.
Yeah, man, it's super exciting to get the first Big 12 win was absolutely huge. Really, really fun to watch them celebrate that one. Watching Kat run out onto the court and just absolutely level her players. It was just, you could tell she was more excited about it than her players were maybe. So, really, really exciting to see. Good step forward. You know, going into the match, like you said, you kind of felt like this is probably a good opportunity for us to grab one here, and there it was. So that's super fun and exciting, and couldn't be more proud of the Cougs.
There were quantifiable things you could see in previous matches, and even some of the non-conference ones you won that says, like, hey, this is a better team than it was last year, but nothing like actually finishing off a team win. There's nothing that beats that, and it was good to see them finally get there. In the more immediate present, the Cougars will go on the road this weekend. Bit of a challenge. You're going to face the current number 17 ranked Central Florida Golden Knights in Orlando. Right now, Texas Tech is the only higher ranked Big 12 women's tennis program, so Knights are going to be a really difficult challenge. I think even getting a point on the board here is difficult. Once they review their schedule, the Knights have dropped a point here and there against opponents you might not have expected them to, so not impossible the Cougars might get a point on the board here, but obviously a very challenging opponent, even as a former AAC program, a program that you look to as kind of the gold standard of what you would like to be eventually in women's tennis, and I'm still excited to see what the Cougars can do on Saturday morning in Orlando.
Yep, just keep the momentum going. You know, if you steal a point here in this match, I think that'll be another great sign for your Cougar tennis team.
Yeah. Got to check it briefly on Cougar track and field, who were at the Texas Relays this past weekend. And Trey Amita had your standout individual performance there, building on what was an incredible 2025 indoor season that we've talked about a decent amount on the show. He won the men's high jump with a best clearance of 7 feet 3 inches. Currently gives Mita the third best performance in the current outdoor season, granted a fairly young outdoor season. You also had the men's 4x4 relay turning in an impressive performance, albeit a performance in an absolutely stacked field of the Texas relays. But the Cougars top relay of Trey East III, Prentice Sanders, Safi Reed, and King Taylor ran what is currently, as of recording tonight, the 10th fastest time in the outdoor season. You'd expect over the course of the season for there to be many faster times to be run in the 4x4. Would expect actually some faster times to be run by this Cougar relay this season. But it's a nice early season statement that in an event where you are competing against other teams that'll be among the very best of the best, that the Cougars will have one of the better relays in the country. You also had in the 110 hurdles, 3 different Cougar men's athletes ran times that, as of recording tonight, stand in the national top 15. None better than John Adesola's 13.45 seconds that he ran in the event prelims, which right now stands as the number 3 time in the country. You had Jamar Marshall Jr., who was your lone NCAA indoor track event qualifier run in the prelims, also the current 9th best time at 13.63 seconds. Worth noting also Anthony Trux's number 15 fastest time of 13.76 seconds was good enough to win the event finals over his fairly quick teammates in a pretty stacked field of competitors. Also worth noting, Casey McCoy got on the podium with her third place finish, in the 100 hurdles. On the women's side, though, her fastest time for the season is still from her season debut with the Kirk Baptiste Invitational. So what does this all mean? The Texas relays definitely aren't an exhaustive listing. I haven't named every single event where I think the Cougars are going to be very good this outdoor season. I would bet good money that the men's 100-meter dash and 4x1, which are kind of bread and butter events historically for H-Town Speed City, are going to be standout ones for the 2025 outdoor season when it's all said and done. But it's also nice to see ones that we expected the Cougars to be good at, like the short hurdles, like the high jump, like the men's 4x4 relay, I think go about as well as we would have expected prior to the Texas relays actually happening.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing was not necessarily that the Cougs came out and won a bunch of events and it was this eye-opening performance, but it just showed that this team is about where you kind of want them to be fairly early on. The Texas relays, I remember from back in high school, not that I was a track guy, I'm slow like molasses, but I had a event there while the Texas relays were going on in Austin, and I remember it being a huge deal when I was in high school. So overall, you didn't see any crazy things that make you go, oh my God, this team's going to win a national title, but you saw what you needed to see out of the Texas relays there.
No doubt. So up next, the Cougars will stay on campus to compete on this coming Friday and Saturday, the Tom Tellis Invitational, hosted as always at the Carl Lewis International Complex. Gotta talk about, unfortunately, Cougar baseball. Wasn't the worst Big 12 weekend series for Cougar baseball, who hosted TCU in Houston this past weekend. You won a close series opener on Friday 3-2. But also, I don't think it was a weekend series that changed our general opinion that Cougar baseball is probably one of the worst handful of teams in the Big 12, because TCU quite handily beat the Cougars in the remaining 2 games, 12-0 on Saturday and 16-5 in the rubber match on Sunday afternoon. I don't feel as negatively about losing 2 of 3 to TCU as I did seeing the Cougars get swept by Texas Tech in the opening Big 12 series. But I don't think you could feel anything but discouraged about how uncompetitive those final 2 games were. The pitching definitely didn't hold up against a potent TCU lineup over those final 2 games. But I would say also a disappointing offensive output against against a Horned Frog pitching staff that you would think maybe this Cougar lineup could do a bit better against. Bobby, what are your thoughts from yet another lost weekend series, and whenever you want to get to it, your superlatives for the best pitchers and hitters from this past weekend for the Cougs?
I would say, I think maybe last week, the week before, I pointed out that, hey, the starters have looked pretty good. My concern has been what's the bullpen looking like? And Sam, once again, another just awful performance by the bullpen here. If you go and look at Saturday, that final was 12-0. I remember a dad of a softball player one time. It was 2-0. I think we lost 2-0, 1-0.
I'm gonna say classic softball score there.
Or maybe we lost by a ton. Maybe we lost 10-0. I can't remember, right? But either way, we were shut out. And I'll never forget, I don't know why. He goes, it doesn't matter how many points or how many runs the pitcher gives up. If you score 0, you won't win a game. And so the first thing you kind of want to harp on is those bats putting up 0 against what I would say is a really good TCU team. But that being said, you go down, you kind of look here. Your starter, Richie Roman, gives you 5, gives up 3.
Wasn't bad.
That's a fine performance. Granted, you're still going to lose because you scored 0, but like then you kind of look and you kind of piecemealed these appearances together. Brady Fuller goes out, pitches 2/3, walks 3, not great, but gets out of it. But then you come down here, you look at Diego Luzardo, and Diego Luzardo, 1 2/3 pitched, 5 earned runs, gives up 5 hits, gives up 5 runs. It's not great. We were kind of worried about this team's pitching, but I think we might have been a little bit more concerned with how they looked starter-wise. We were kind of like, well, maybe we can see this guy coming in and being a starter, but buddy, that bullpen has just not looked good this year. So, that's kind of where I'm at with all of that this year. Just the bullpen just didn't look good this weekend, and that's disheartening at times.
So alluded to a bit ago, not really anyone else you could pick for pitcher of the weekend. Antoine John, because sometimes you go with some variation of, hey, there's multiple answers to this question. Bobby, if I had picked anyone but Antoine John, I think you should have had some serious questions for me, because we'll say the larger pitching staff failures shouldn't make anyone overlook what an excellent outing he had on Friday against one of the best lineups in the Big 12. John gave you 4 1/3 scoreless innings, only allowed 2 hits, struck out 4, got a deserved 3rd win this season. And over his college career, he's shown flashes of excellence, but staying healthy has been a good problem. And however the rest of the season goes, I think you could be happy at seeing the guy get rewards of his hard work this season and be able to give you stuff on, excuse me. Kyle's coming back on a Friday night win.
Yeah, I think for me you're exactly right. That's kind of a hard one to argue with. There's nobody else on a Friday to come through the way he did is spectacular. So
yeah, and got an okay outing for Richie Roman. That's literally the only thing else nice you can say pitching wise about the weekend.
Yep, I agree 100%. So Sam, who was your hitter of the week?
Didn't have a lot of guys I love for that, but I went with Xavier Perez. Again, not a ton of standout performances. He only managed 8 runs as a team over 27 innings played this weekend. But I tried to look at when the hits happen for guys in picking for this weekly award. And Perez is the guy who got you in the board in the low scoring Friday night when he had that 2 RBI double in the 3rd inning of the Friday night game. And it was part of a 2 for 4, 2 RBI performance overall. And he was part of that first inning offensive explosion on Sunday when the Cougs briefly took a 4-0 lead. So not a season-defining performance, but a solid weekend for a guy in Xavier Perez who, for whatever failings of this team at large have been, I think he's been inarguably a positive contributor for you in his first year at the program.
Yeah, that's who I chose as well. 2 walks on the Saturday game. It goes 2 for 4 on Friday. Just a great performance all around from him. Not only just stat line, but like you said, kind of the clutchness of the hits as well.
I mean, that's kind of where I'm with this team. Like, you have some guys who game in, game out can give you good performances. Antoine Jean and sometimes Richie Roman on the mound. And then hitters like Perez, but also Connor McGinnis and Aaron Lugo. Trey Broussard's also an exciting guy in the field on the base paths, but you got to say it. The team product now for a 7th year in a row is not remotely close to being NCAA tournament level. And that's a long time. Like, do you ever go back and think, like, we gave, I guess we being Mac Rhodes in this case, but we literally gave, and I know the overall product had been declining for Cougar baseball at the time, but like, we gave Rainer Noble literally 2 non-NCAA tournament seasons before canning him. And this is now 7, and we're not 100% sure that we're even going to have a coaching change this offseason.
Yeah,
That's an insane run. That's an insane run, man. Come on.
It is. I think where you have a difference is how good the current staff is at raising money. I think there are other things that go into that. I think Rainer Noble is a great example. I think Rainer Noble going 2 years without making it. Like you said, I feel like there was more momentum losing with Rainer Noble than it is with this. I mean, we joke that every year we come back and we read D1 baseball and Kendall Rogers and talk about how this Houston team could be that. At the end of the Rainer Noble era, it never felt like it was one of those where it was like, hey, this year maybe they'll run it back. It definitely felt more like it was always a struggle the last couple of years of his of the Noble administration. But this winning one always seems to have enough potential that you kind of get excited. I think at the end of the Noble, that those last couple of years of Rainer, you were kind of like, yeah, this team's not going to be very good.
Yeah, I'm not saying we should have canned winning 5 years ago or anything like that. Just that it's been a long time since we had a team that we conceivably thought in early June. I mean, you talk about like the women's selection show earlier, and Matthew, hoping Matthew Mitchell makes us care about that. The last time on Memorial Day that you or I watched the NCAA baseball bracket show with any hope that U of H would be there.
Yeah.
2019, man, that was the last time.
Yeah.
We were like one of the first teams left out, and we haven't even been close since then.
Last year, not last year, the year before.
We weren't.
The year before, where we ran
we weren't
through
even
the
close.
AAC.
That's cool. That's cool. We almost won the regular AAC regular season. We weren't close to being an at-large team.
I don't know, man. I'd say maybe we were close.
No chance.
Chance.
Not getting an agreement up for me on that one.
That's fine. We're not going to agree on everything. Not that I'm like, oh man, that's why you should keep them. Like, we still didn't make the tournament, but yeah, I think there are questions to be asked around this program. I think Whitting still has a year left on his contract, so yep. I would be surprised if he was let go.
I think it depends how the rest of the season goes. This isn't a tournament team, but I think the degrees of how much of this is not a tournament team, I think is the answer. I think we have a carbon copy of last year's season. Like, you win 7 Big 12 games and you don't come close to qualifying for the tournament. Yeah. I think there's a different coach here, but I also don't think that's guaranteed to be this team's results, because we have seen this team be able to do some things well at times. Just not to beat my point to death, probably not a tournament team.
Yep.
And it doesn't get any easier in the short term. This coming weekend, the Cougars are traveling to Waco to take on the Baylor Bears. Baylor's 4-5 in Big 12 play. Probably not a team that's going to contend for the regular season title, but are also coming off winning a road series in Tucson over what was at the time number 12 team in the country in Arizona. And like the TCU team that the Cougars struggled mightily against this past weekend, Baylor's a really, really good hitting team. I have a hard time seeing this weekend series going much better than taking maybe 1 of 3, and I think a sweep here is not out of the question. Hope I'm wrong. Hope we're talking about a Cougar series win next weekend. But again, I think we're starting to get a clear picture of how Cougar baseball stacks up against Big 12 competition and what this team's deficiencies are. And it hasn't been pretty anytime we faced a team with a better lineup.
Yeah, it's, as we've discussed multiple times here, anytime you play a team that has a really good lineup, it is going to be concerning, especially with this bullpen staff.
Bobby, really quick, end this with a better taste in all of our mouths, because I know you have a quick announcement about a Cougar team near and dear to our hearts that will be competing up in your neck of the woods.
Oh yeah, no, that's going to be just a super exciting thing for me personally. Cougar women's golf is headed to Dallas this upcoming week. Kind of funny, if U of H makes the national title game, they will actually be in Dallas playing in this tournament, and they will be playing the next day. So Godspeed to the women's golf team if we win a national title and they are playing golf the next day. But fingers crossed that they have to do that. But super excited to get out there, go watch them play some golf on Tuesday.
So let's get Bobby Hungover out there wearing his biggest sunglasses, powering through a night of celebrating the Cougar men's basketball national title and watching some golf on the links.
Yeah, definitely won't be there for the very first tee time if the Cougs do win that national title.
Not gonna be out there while there's still dew on the course, bud.
Yeah, it won't be a sweeper. right there.
All right, Bobby, take us home.
All right, well, as Sam said, that is it for this episode of the Scott Holman podcast. We thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it a ton. If you have any feedback for us, please send us a message on social media. You can find us on Twitter at SH Podcast. You can find us on Blue Sky at podcast.bsky.social. And then you can also email us. If you've sworn off social media, you can email us shpodcast@gmail.com. We will read that and we will take your suggestion. We might not do it. I won't lie to you, but we will absolutely take your suggestion and discuss it. And if you really want us to take your suggestion serious, you can follow us on Patreon at SH Podcast on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can support the work Sam and I do on a weekly basis. So if you want to visit us there, you can find us at SH Podcast on Patreon or patreon.com/SH Podcast. That's pod with a W because, it's a cougar paw. And so that is it for us. We have spoken about Cougar athletics for about an hour now. So I think it's time for all of us to go eat some dinner and enjoy ourselves. And Sam, what do we always say?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!